Our scripture reading this morning comes from the 8th chapter of Luke, verses 22 through 25. Now on one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he said to them, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they launched out. But as they were sailing along, he fell asleep, and a fierce gale of wind descended on the lake, and they began to be swamped and to be in danger. They came to Jesus and woke him up, saying, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he got up and rebuked the wind and the surging waves, and they stopped, and it became calm. And he said to them, "Where is your faith?" They were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?"
Good morning. Many people say that there is no such thing as minor surgery, right? They say surgery can be minor if it's on someone else. All surgery on me, that's major. Always and always will be. I believe that reflects a perspective that we all have to some degree. We will say that someone else's problem is a minor problem, but if we are experiencing that same problem in our life, it is suddenly a much bigger problem. We will say that someone else's crisis looks to us to be something that is manageable, but if we are experiencing a crisis, sometimes we say it's not as manageable as you might think. We will say that someone else's difficult situation has a simple solution, but if we're experiencing the same difficult situation, sometimes the solution doesn't seem so simple. Nowhere do we reflect this common perspective more than in our faith in Jesus Christ's ability to help people. Quickly and emphatically, I think most of us would tell someone, Jesus Christ can help you with any problem that you have, any trial that you may experience. There is simply nothing that Jesus Christ cannot help you with. Then we will encourage and maybe even to some degree insist that the person place his or her confidence in Jesus' help and in Jesus' power. Yet, when we are struggling with any kind of problem or any form of trial, we do not function on that same conviction. We sometimes do not function with that same level of confidence. And when someone tries to encourage us to depend on Jesus, depend on His help, to depend on His power, we resist their encouragement. And in fact, there is at times those that will become offended that we would make their problems out to be something so small. In the 3rd chapter of Luke, and we're going to talk about things from the 3rd chapter all the way through the 8th chapter, but in the 3rd chapter of the Gospel of Luke, we are introduced to the beginning of Jesus' ministry. His ministry that went all throughout the area of Palestine. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River by John the Baptist. Immediately after his baptism, he was driven into the wilderness by the Spirit for 40 days, where he faced certain special temptations from Satan. We are told then that Jesus returned to Galilee from his wilderness experience in the power of the Spirit. And that's chapter 4 and verse 13. And the news about what Jesus was teaching and doing literally exploded across that region. And his popularity zoomed off of the charts. The Gospel of Luke then immediately stresses Jesus' teaching ministry. Jesus taught in the synagogues throughout the land and was praised by everyone. Among those synagogues that Jesus taught at was the synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth, where many people knew him, and many people even knew him when he was but just a child. But He taught that Sabbath day in that synagogue, and the lesson that He taught enraged the people of that audience. And they were so upset at what He had taught that in the emotion of the moment, they wanted to kill Him. And a mob took Him and outside of town to a cliff, and with the intention of throwing Him over that cliff and killing Him. And yet when Jesus reached that cliff, He turned and He passed back through them as if they were not even there. One of those demonstrations in the Scriptures that no one can kill Jesus unless He allows it. But He escapes miraculously that day. He then went to the city of Capernaum, and He began teaching in the synagogues there on Saturdays. And the people present were amazed at His lessons. They were amazed at His teaching style. The people present were amazed at what He could do. One Saturday, a demon-possessed man came into the synagogue. And when he heard and saw Jesus, the demon began to shout at Jesus. And he said, "Why are you here? To destroy us? We know who you are. You are the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked the demonic spirit, made it be quiet, and ordered it to leave the man. And the spirit threw the man to the ground, but did not harm him as it left. Everyone present was astounded. And immediately they all began to discuss the fact that Jesus had the power to command the demons. And they obeyed. Shortly after this, Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law of a high fever. And she immediately got up from her sick bed and she began to serve Jesus at that time. That evening, everyone in Capernaum that had a family member that was sick or diseased in any way, they brought them to Jesus and He healed them all. He had that power and ability. One morning after that, Peter, a fisherman, had fished all night with his partners and had caught nothing at the beginning of Luke chapter 5. And on the Sea of Galilee, they netted fish at night because when the sun rose, the fish would then go back into the deeper parts of the sea and you couldn't catch it during the day. After the daylight, though, had come, Jesus told Peter to put back out and to lower his nets in a specific place. And Peter, I guess out of respect for Jesus, if nothing else, went ahead and did this when everything in his fishing experience says this is a futile effort, right? He puts his boat back out there, casts his nets, and the nets are so full that they're tearing and almost sinking his boat and the boat that came to help him as well. Jesus healed a man of leprosy, a disease everyone regarded to be incurable. He instantly restored a paralyzed man to perfect health. In fact, the man stood up, picked up his own stretcher, and walked away after Jesus had restored his ability to walk. A Roman military officer who had a dying servant in Luke chapter 7 came to Jesus. And he's so concerned about his servant that he asked Jesus to heal his servant. And Jesus said that He would go with the man to his house and he would deal with this, that he would do this. But the Roman soldier said, "No, I'm not worthy for you to come into my house. And I am a man of authority, and I understand that you're a man of authority. And when you say to someone go, they go. And when I say something to someone to go, they go. All you got to do is say it." That's incredible faith for a Roman soldier, isn't it? When so many Jews failed to have that kind of faith. He trusted Jesus' power, and he knew that Jesus could heal the man without going to his house. And you know what? Jesus did. He healed that servant long distance without ever seeing the man or ever speaking to the man. Jesus was on a journey, and He came near the town of Nain. And as He neared the town, there was a funeral procession coming out, and there was a woman crying there, a mother, a widow, who had just lost her only son, which guarantees that she's now going to live a life of destitution. And she's walking there with her lifeless child. And Jesus comes up and says, "Don't cry." And He raises her son from the dead right there on the road as they were going to the cemetery. Later, in Luke chapter 8 and verse 2, Jesus cast 7 demons out of a very well-known biblical character, Mary Magdalene. Now I want you to pretend with me for just a moment. I want you to think about a situation that could have happened and how it might have been responded to. Let's pretend for just a moment that someone who has not heard Jesus teach, someone who has not seen the miracles that Jesus has been performing, walks up to His disciples. And those disciples are standing there by the Sea of Galilee, standing near the boat because Jesus is going to want to get in that boat and move out onto the sea before long. He's still talking and working with the people. Let's suppose that this man asked the disciples, "Hey guys, is this Jesus for real? Is He really doing all those things I've heard people say that He can do? Or is it just some kind of exaggeration? You know how stories get as they go around. Is He really doing those things, or is it some kind of coincidence?" What do you think the disciples' reply is going to be? Can you imagine that reply? "You must be kidding. Where have you been? Have you been under a rock somewhere, missing all this?" All 12 of them probably would have begun talking at once. They would say, "We can understand that it's hard for you to believe what you've heard, but we've seen these things with our very eyes. It's not some rumor to us. We've lived it. He walked through an angry mob that was determined to kill Him, and no one even touched Him. We have seen Him cast out so many demons that we've just lost count. We have seen Him heal every single sick person that's brought to Him. It doesn't matter what the disease is. It doesn't matter what's wrong with them. He can heal them. Even deformities He can heal." You should have been there that morning when He told Peter to go drop his nets in that spot. We just barely got back to shore with all the fish that we caught. We saw Him heal a man of leprosy, and the man's skin became as healthy as ours in an instant. We saw Him heal a paralyzed man that got up, didn't need to have any rehabilitation, right? He just got up and walked. Picked up his stretcher he was laying on and carried it. We were there when He healed a man long distance. Never saw the man, never talked to the man. But we know now the man was healed at the moment that He said it. We were standing right by Him. If you can believe this or not. We were standing right by Him when He walked up to a funeral procession and just raised the guy right out of his deathbed as they were going to the cemetery. Jesus has the power to do anything. And there is nothing that Jesus can't do. Don't you think that's kind of the gist of what the disciples might have said to such a person? We've seen it. Sounds an awful lot like John in 1 John when he said, "I've seen Him. I've beheld Him. I know this man. I'm going to tell you about the Jesus I saw." Now, consider what actually happened. Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 25. Jesus said to those 12 disciples, "Get in the boat and let's cross over the lake." So He and the 12 got into the boat and they launched it and they started on the lake, on the Sea of Galilee there. It's probably smooth, the wind was calm. And Jesus was exhausted. He'd been going all day long. Jesus worked very hard. And when you look closely at the text, you see that. And He lays down and takes a nap there in the boat. It's not uncommon for fierce winds to come down off the mountains north of the Sea of Galilee and sweep across the Sea of Galilee. Not so much as the way we think about necessarily storms like we have here, but they'll sweep down and they'll cause the weather to get all mixed up. And it still happens this very day. Just a couple of weeks before I was at the Sea of Galilee, 2 teenage boys out on a little boat got swept away by strong winds coming down off those mountains and sweeping across, and they drowned. Still happens to this day. It's still a dangerous place at times. But a gale force wind blasted down upon the lake, churned up the waves, and and they were swamping the boat, and the boat was taking on water so fast that the disciples were convinced that they literally just had minutes or moments to live. And they woke Jesus shouting, "We're going to die. We're going to perish." Jesus woke up, told the wind to be still and the water to be calm, and instantly the lake was smooth as glass without a puff of wind. And then what does He say? He turns to His disciples and asks a question. Where is your faith? Why is that question? And the disciples were terrified. Not of the storm that had stopped, but of the man that was in their boat that stopped it. Why were they suddenly afraid of Jesus? Why were they amazed at His stilling the storm? With all the ways that they had witnessed Jesus, they'd witnessed His power. Why were they amazed that He had the power to stop a storm? I'll tell you why. Because they were in the boat. It was their storm that they were experiencing. All the miracles they had witnessed, the casting out of demons, the healing of sicknesses and diseases, the healing of paralytics, the healing of leprosy, long distance healing, raising from the dead. Folks, every one of those things was someone else's storm in someone else's boat. And so, yeah, Jesus can handle that. But now it's their storm. And it's their boat. And it's a lot different. They had been spectators to those other things, not this time. They had total confidence in Jesus' ability to take care of other people's storms, but it was an entirely different issue to believe that Jesus could take care of theirs. They did not believe that the man who could cure diseases, cast out demons, and raise people back from the dead could do anything about the winds and the waves, especially the winds and the waves in their lives. And I'm afraid that many of us sometimes are just like the 12. Someone says to us, "We're really having family problems right now." And we say, "Jesus can help you." He really can. Please let Him, through faith and the application of biblical principles in regard to family, let Him help you. Somebody says, I really made a mess out of my life. And we say, that's what Christianity's about. It's about fixing the mess that we make in our lives with sin. It's about fixing our lives with Jesus' help. Somebody says, everything around me is falling apart. And we say, Jesus can get you through this. Because building your life on the rock can endure any storm that this life can throw upon you. Someone says, I'm in the biggest crisis I've ever experienced. And we say, there's no crisis too big that Jesus can't handle. And then we have family problems. We find our lives in a mess. And we find that our world is falling apart. And we discover that we are going through a huge crisis. And we say, I don't think Jesus can help me. I've had people say that to me when I've talked to them about it. I don't think this is anything Jesus can deal with. And suddenly we're in our boat, in our storm. And the question still applies, doesn't it? Where is your faith? People are still the same as they were in those 12 men in that boat. I want you to focus on two very quick lessons from inside that boat. Lesson number one is you can't sink a boat with Jesus in it. That boat was never going to sink, folks. Never was going to sink. Didn't matter whether they woke him up right then or not. That boat wasn't going down because Jesus was in it. You can't sink a boat with Jesus in it. You can't sink a life with Jesus in it. Jesus has the power to sustain us in any situation. And we may be in that tunnel, and the tunnel may be a little bit curved to where we can't see any light on the other side. But I promise you, just like Psalm 23 said when he talked about going through that valley of deep darkness, there's a point where if we just stay with the shepherd, that He'll bring us to green grass and still waters where we can restore our soul. Not only can you not sink an individual with Jesus in their life, folks, you can't sink a congregation with Jesus at its center. I had some people one time tell me, a little group decided that they wanted their way and they were going to threaten the church to get it. And they said, if we leave here, this church will close its doors within a year. I told them my faith wasn't in them. And that church is still there some 25 years later after they left. Because you can't sink a church with Jesus in it. Lesson number 2. Jesus still storms, but He doesn't bail boats. When Jesus stilled the storm, the boat still had a dangerous amount of water in it. Jesus stilled the storm, but it says nothing about the water in the boat. It says nothing about Jesus bailing water from the boat. Folks, Jesus is in charge of storm control. Disciples are in charge of bailing water. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 makes it very clear to us and ensures that Jesus Christ controls temptations. He doesn't allow us to have temptations in our life that we cannot handle. Provides a way of escape. But folks, I want you to take note of this. It doesn't say He removes the temptation. He makes it to where we can manage it. He's in storm control. But then I have to do my part and manage it, right? I have to beat it. I have to take the way of escape that has been provided for me by God. He kept the crisis manageable, and the disciples were able to overcome the water in the boat. When the disciples experienced the direct benefit of Jesus' power in the face of certain tragedy, in fear and in awe, they ask a question. Who is this man? I assure you, the first time that you experience the direct benefit of Jesus' power found when you dedicate your life to Him and to His principles found in God's Word, those things that He both began to do and to teach, then you will find that in the face of certain tragedy you can and you will overcome. And in that moment, you're going to want to ask that question too. Who is this man that's able to get me through such difficult things? And the answer to that question is what will lead you to great faith and great dedication to the one that did. He may ask you, where is your faith? But you can find it. And you can find it in Him. May you ask that question and find that answer in His Word that has all things that pertain to this, to life and godliness. May you this morning, if you have not, put Jesus in your boat. I don't know where you are in your life. I don't know where your faith is or where your dedication is. I don't know if you're the kind of person that would say, Jesus can't help me with that, or you're the kind of person that says, yes, He absolutely can. Whether you're a Joshua and Caleb that says, with God's help we can take the land, or whether you're one of the other 10 that don't think that God can ever do anything to overcome the great things that you might be dealing with in your life. I don't know where you're at. But the one thing you need, wherever you're at, is Jesus in your life. It's Jesus in the boat of your life. Even if you're in the middle of a terrible storm. Because, folks, even if you are, you can't sink that boat. Jesus won't allow it. This morning, if Jesus is not a part of your life, if you haven't obeyed the gospel, if you haven't given your life to Him, then you're all alone. And there is just no hope. And the storms of this world will beat you down. Because there's no storm control in your life and there's no power to see you through. Don't go another day like that. Obey the gospel of Jesus Christ today. If you know what that is, we hope and pray that you'll do it. If you don't, we hope and pray that you'll look around here and ask someone. We'd be sure happy to tell you what Jesus said. This morning, if you're a child of God, maybe you haven't had the faith. Maybe the question is, where is your faith this morning? And maybe you're asking that question yourself. Then you need to look to the man. The man that can still the storms, heal the lives, and one day raise the dead. Look to Him. If we can help you find Him, if we can help you see Him more clearly, we want to do that. Won't you come as we stand and as we sing?